Hey guys, welcome back to the fanfic reread project. In this episode, we are going to be beginning our reread of the original version of Lego Story. To quickly summarize, Lego Story is a fanfic that I wrote that's inspired by Lego Marvel superheroes, which I got for Christmas in 2013, and I started writing this in 2014. This story is supposed to be a retelling of the game. However, it was supposed to lead into another, more original plot fanfic that dealt with some stuff that other characters were going with during the events of the games that no one really realized. We can talk about that a little bit more as we get into this. The other thing is that the first chapter and a half of this draft were edited later, but I don't remember how long afterward it was. I did actually restart this recording, so I'm reading this again, and judging by the writing style, it doesn't seem like it was too long after when I first started it, so at the latest sometime in 2015 probably, because it doesn't seem like I actually changed that much of the writing, along with the punctuation errors as well. But again, I'm not entirely sure, so this is not 100% chronologically correct. However, so little of this draft is edited that it basically doesn't matter. But either way, a third of the way through chapter 2, this will jump edits back to the old version of chapter 2. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. Now that all of that is out of the way, let's jump into chapter 1 of Lego Story. Agents Romanoff and Barton report. Natasha hopped down from where she was sitting on the counter. Got everything you need? She asked. Yeah. You sure you want to go so soon? Dr. Banner asked back. He hadn't even had time to put down the syringe before Fury had called her. He hurried to put a bandage over the spot before she rolled her sleeve down over it. I'll be fine, she answered matter-of-factly as she grabbed her jacket. He just shrugged as she made her way up the stairs and out of the medical bay. Natasha ran a hand through her loose curls, absently detangling the ends with her fingers. It was getting pretty long now, longer than it was before she cut it last, before the Loki incident. Clint joined her in the hall as she passed the Wishbone lab. Why do you keep letting Bruce suck blood out of your arm? Hey to you too, she responded sarcastically. I know, but why? He insisted. She shrugged. He needed it for his experiments. I volunteered. Is that all right? I mean, with that serum and stuff? I'm the control too, she said with a nod. Everything is good. This intro's weird. I really don't think this is a good introduction of the characters, especially Clint. Natasha, at least you do establish some stuff about her, as soon as Fury calls, she's literally getting blood drawn, and seemingly has been getting blood drawn for a little while. So she just jumps up, and then she puts on her coat, and Bruce has to hurry to even put on the Band-Aid because she's just so serious about work. And, that's fine. The scenario that it comes from is a little bit weird, but that's there on purpose. It was meant to set up something that was supposed to happen in the sequel, so at least it has a purpose. But Clint's introduction is literally he walks out of a lab. What? There's nothing else that we could get about that. Not Clint was doing something in a lab and then he got up and walked out, or Natasha goes to find him or something. Nope, he just walks out of a lab. Hey, why you keep letting him do this? It just seems like a weird way to introduce one of our primary side characters. Well, he's not really a side character, he's a main character, but still. But anyway, let's keep moving. They entered the bridge at the top of a balcony that overlooked the entire room, which was bathed in the wavering light as it shined down through the river. Run-on sentences, I did not miss you. Director Fury was at the head of the room, standing in the middle of the control center, monitors surrounding him like panels of a giant glass halo. Agent Hill was there as well, typing furiously on one of the computers at her station. Fury didn't even bother with a greeting once they reached him. He began with the briefing immediately. We had Iron Man chasing down a sky surfer earlier, but he got shot out of the sky by an unmarked helicopter. Who by? Natasha asked. We don't know. The pilot was a nobody, Maria told them. Tony is fine, by the way. Good. But why would a nobody want Tony? Clint asked. Or what exactly is a sky surfer? This. Maria turned one of the screens so they could see the picture displayed on it. There was literally a man on a surfboard amongst the clouds, his back turned to the camera, with skin that gleamed like he was made out of some kind of polished metal. We got an incredible energy reading off of him, and when they hit him, the board broke into pieces. Unfortunately, we lost track of him after the incident. His energy signature is still on the board pieces, it seems, but not him. And that's exactly what we're worried about, Fury continued. We can't keep track of every henchman that every supervillain employs, but I'm willing to bet that nobody works for somebody. I need you two to go get Captain Rogers from the Avengers Mansion. Any person big enough to hire their help is trouble, and if they're going to start bringing them in, then so are we. They both nodded and then headed for the elevator. This scene in isolation is kind of okay. It is weird how abruptly Fury gets into the briefing, but at least it's used for a character establishing moment, so I guess it's okay. My problem is that this moment is not the only moment like this throughout the story. Now, every story has moments where characters have to have things explained to them. That's fine, it happens. But there is a time and a place for it, and if you do it too much, it starts to feel like the story is just people info dumping on you, and you don't want that. This story has a lot of briefing scenes that are just thinly disguised info dumps, and it's kind of ridiculous. And the reason why this keeps happening is because Natasha and Clint are the main characters. And I know that sounds weird. However, LEGO Marvel Superheroes is a game that spans the entirety of the Marvel Universe that they were allowed to license for the game. So not only do the Avengers show up, but also, as you can see, Silver Surfer, who in the media sense is licensed by Fox, and other like Fantastic Four characters, including the Fantastic Four themselves. The X-Men show up, and Spider-Man is also there too, because this was written before Spider-Man was part of the MCU. So there are all kinds of characters that show up in this game. Natasha and Clint, yes, they are Avengers, but they are not, even by a long shot, primary characters in this game. They are playable in 2 levels. And that is like basically it. I think Natasha is included in the very last level, and Clint might be too, but there are like a million characters in those levels, so it's kind of hard to remember. But as actual primary playable characters, they only show up twice, and it's very early on in the game. The issue with that is that because they aren't around, and it's not super easy to work them into other levels, you miss a lot of the story by following what these two are doing. So then you get a lot of moments like what we just read, where the characters have to have something important that happened off screen explained to them, instead of us seeing it firsthand through the eyes of another character who is actually there. And you can see why this is problematic. And like I said, it's not easy to work these two characters into other levels, because after a while you start to wonder like why Nick Fury just keeps sending them. What I think I should have done is to have a revolving POV format where you get like multiple POV characters throughout the story to witness different events, because there's no one character who is present in every single level either. So having at least a handful, because there are multiple characters who show up in a lot of levels, would have covered most of the story. However, instead what we get is 2 basically side characters in the story being the main characters of this, and 99.9% of the plot happening off screen, while these 2 go and do what should be a side plot in the story. But anyway, so yeah, that scene was like, yes, in isolation, the scene was alright, but it is indicative of a larger problem, as you'll see as we read through this. So let's keep moving. A boat took them from the helicarrier to the island, where they pulled a truck out of the garage just off the docks. Clint decided to drive this time. "You think the Sky Surfer is actually a threat?" he asked as he put on his sunglasses. She shrugged as she pulled her feet up into her seat. "Can't be much if he got shot out of the sky by a helicopter. I'm more worried about where he came from, though. I've never seen anything like that before. It's kind of otherworldly." He nodded in agreement, but then he looked at her. "You don't think—" She bit her lip and shrugged again. "Space, Nat? I mean, I guess he could be." "You guess?" she repeated. "I've never seen a silver person before. Lots of blue, a little red and green, but never silver. But there are some here, though. One of Xavier's can turn his skin to steel. I'm surprised you've never met him before. And Emma Frost can turn herself into a diamond. It's probably just a mutant." She shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's the flying. But something about that guy just doesn't say, I'm from Earth, like mutants do. Even if that was the case, why does he want to call in Steve? It's not exactly his area of expertise. Didn't stop us last time. Speaking of Steve, she started, patting her jacket and then letting out a sigh. I need to use your phone. I left mine on the helicarrier. She reached into his pocket and pulled it out herself. First, she sent a text to her phone telling whoever had or would find it to give it to Agent Coulson, and then she dialed the number for the mansion. He picked up on the first ring. That was fast. Okay, so let's pause right here to talk about, why is Steve coming in? So, going back to the briefing, Director Fury is like, I bet that henchman does work for somebody, which is a correct assumption, and a good one to make for someone in his position. However, the response to that is, if they're bringing them in, quote unquote, then so are we. I understand Fury being like, okay, so if there is a possible supervillain out to get these objects of power, we might want to be prepared. But Steve, like, if you're going to do that, I understand Tony is a little bit like out of commission right now because he just got shot out of the sky by a helicopter. But you might want to, like, Bruce is already on the helicarrier, not him, not the Fantastic Four who deal with this nonsense all the time, not any of the X-Men technically aren't affiliated with S.H.I.E.L.D., so they'd have to ask permission, so I get that. But, like, the Fantastic Four, again, right there. Literally, like, you come off the docks, and if they just drove in the other direction, they could go to the Baxter building and get them. But, no, Steve... It's just a weird choice that clearly is there because, Steve's an Avenger and Steve needs to be present for an event that is going to happen during next chapter, I think. But, like, still, it's a little bit weird. But anyway, that was fast. I'm the only one home. She could hear his voice echoing behind the receiver, as if he needed to go to the gym. Sorry to crash your party, but Fury wants you to come in, she told him. We're coming to get you. Now, he asked. Yup. Is there something going on? There was a hint of concern in his voice. This is kind of sudden. Well, there was an incident this morning with Tony, an unknown in an unmarked chopper, and an unidentified flying person, possibly extraterrestrial in origin, she said. Clint gave her a look. Possibly. Tony is fine, by the way, she added. That's good, but... 1 second, Cap. She cut in when the phone began vibrating. The S.H.I.E.L.D. insignia was on the screen, indicating the agency's messaging system. She put the phone on speaker after she slid open the lock. And apparently, she continued, talking to Steve and Clint at the same time now, Grand Central Station is being held hostage by Sandman and the Abomination. Didn't we put them away? Steve asked. We did, Clint confirmed, but it looks like they got back out. I'll suit up, Steve said. Yeah, we're around the corner, Natasha told him, and then she hung up. This is all happening really fast, she said, half to herself. And don't bother rolling out that Mr. Rogers joke you all like to do this time, she told Clint offhandedly as they turned on the Fifth Avenue. He's finally seen it. Damn. Very quick change of subject there for a joke. So one of the issues that I started to run into with the pacing of the game that makes sense in a game but doesn't really make sense in a book is that everything happens like back to back to back like this. Also, do you see again why Natasha and Clint being the main characters is problematic? The level that this is taking place during is the first proper level of the game, and the characters that you play as during that level are Iron Man, the Hulk, and Spider-Man, with the former two being the two that are present for the entire thing. So we literally could have started this with Tony opening up the whole thing and then continuing in Tony's POV for this incident and seeing it firsthand, but instead... we have these people learning about everything secondhand. It's just very strange. Like, why would you write a story about a video game if you're going to put all the action of the video game off screen? Did I finish what I was saying about the pacing? Regarding the pacing one last time, in later versions of the story, I decided to actually change the way the events happen so that things don't happen so closely together. Partially because, again, the pacing of the game doesn't really work in a book format, but also because I realized that to keep the heroes from realizing what the villains are up to, it makes more sense to space out the attacks and stuff. But we can talk about that more when we get to it. It suffices to say that the pacing of the actual game is a little problematic, and it translates in this story. Steve was already outside when they pulled into the driveway of the big brick mansion, shield in hand. Are we going down there? He asked as he got in the car. Fury told us to bring you back to the helicarrier, and we haven't been told any different, Clint said to him, so as of now, no. But shouldn't someone take care of... He was cut off again by the car phone ringing. Really? Some people just don't respect their elders, Clint mumbled, shaking his head. Natasha rolled her eyes as he pushed the button to answer the call. Agent Barton speaking. Fury wants you three at Grand Central, Maria's voice said over the speaker. Don't rush, though, she told them. We've got Stark and the Hulk taking care of the problem. He just wants you there when he gets there. He'll brief you on the situation. Of course he will. Yes, ma'am, Clint said as he hung up. I lied. We're going down there. This is getting serious pretty fast, Steve said back. And what was that about an unidentified flying person? It's probably just a mutant, Clint repeated. Or an alien, Natasha added. Clint scoffed. Mulder, please. Steve leaned forward. Do you really think it's extraterrestrial, he asked. She nodded, while Clint just shrugged. You don't think it could have anything to do with another alien we know, do you? That's a pretty big jump to make, Clint said. Besides, Loki is locked up. So were Marco and Blonsky, Steve countered. Yeah, but they weren't in the raft. Loki is, all the way at the bottom, in a cell that they built just for him. And Loki doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would go for Sandman, Natasha agreed. Abomination, maybe, but probably not. His ego is too big to settle for common criminals, even if they can turn themselves into sand. Either way, Steve said with a shrug, Fury will tell us what's going on so we can stop trading conspiracy theories. Clint nodded in agreement. They rode the rest of the way in silence, and Natasha took the time to get her thoughts together. It's funny how Steve manages to hit on exactly what the plot is very early on, and the characters are like, no, that doesn't make sense. However, what I will say is that one of the issues with the pacing, like I said, is that it's much easier for the characters to cop to what's going on because everything happens so quickly. There's no way the people who are orchestrating this can't be working together. Silver Surfer is shot out of the sky, and not even an hour later, Abomination and Sandman show up and hold up Grand Central Station. A few hours after this, you'll see in Chapter 2 that Dr. Octopus breaks into a place and takes one of the cosmic bricks, as they start calling them. It's ridiculous. And then the Green Goblin literally shows up right after Dr. Octopus gets thwarted. And there's no way that these people don't know what's going on, and they're not just stealing from each other, you know? It's too close and it's too convenient. If you space out the events of the plot, then you can get away with some of this other stuff happening, oh, isn't it weird that this happened and this happened, and then the characters will be like, yeah, but this happened 3 days apart, so who knows? And we do know that the villains would go scrambling after these things because they are objects of power, as Maria told us. It's just that this early on, it's kind of problematic. But anyway, let's keep going. The military had cut ties with Blonsky ages ago, and Marco's only connections were to a few street gangs. They weren't attached to any of the usuals, the ones that weren't already in jail anyway. They'd put Loki in an isolated cell that they knew he couldn't escape from on his own, because that was the only way Thor would let them keep him. He'd been quiet for a year now. The Sky Surfer incident was something else entirely. It seemed to her that, more than anything else, they were just going to have a very busy day ahead of themselves. Foreshadowing. They were about a block away from the station when they were forced to stop. Both S.H.I.E.L.D. and the police had their hands busy restraining the requisite group of onlookers with their phones, tablets, and cameras turned toward the sky. Natasha got out as Agent Claire Wise came up to the truck. How bad is it? She asked. Messy, was all Claire said back. She waved her along as she started to make her way through the crowd. Messy turned out to be an understatement. Natasha was taken aback when they reached the barricades they were using to cordon off the area. There was a lot of sand, at least enough to fill a beach. The people from damage control were looking a little overwhelmed, and she couldn't blame them. All of this came from Flint? She asked Claire, looking toward Grand Central. She could just see a giant humanoid shape coming up from the sand flowing off of the roof, punching an Iron Man shadowy figure as it flew over him. I don't remember it being this bad. Is that what I think it is? Clint asked as he came up next to her. He pointed toward a large piece of metal sticking out from the newly formed dunes that looked curiously like one of the letters from the Stark Tower sign. Any clue what they're after? Natasha said to Claire. Our people tracked one of the pieces of that Sky Surfer's board here, she explained. Abomination and Marco tried to intercept it, and when that didn't work, they held up the station. But what would they want it for? Steve asked. I didn't even think they knew each other. See, this is what I'm talking about. These are two characters who were enemies in completely different franchises, if you go by the movies. So it's very weird that these two people show up in the same place. But anyway, it is what it is, so let's keep going. That's what we're trying to figure out. They all turned to find Coulson approaching, sunglasses pulled up on his forehead. "Fury's here," he told them. Soon after, there was a whooshing sound as sand came cascading down over the walls of the station. And just in time, too, Natasha said as they started to follow him back. Coulson's introduction made it seem like he was going to say something else. I kind of wish he did. Any story with more Coulson in it is a good story. The director was back by the trucks, sending some agents off to apprehend Marco and Blonsky and wrangle the Hulk. Natasha jumped slightly when Tony landed by her side. "Sand, so much sand," he muttered, shaking out his arms. Some of it actually came falling out from the joints of his suit. "He doesn't just turn into it, he makes it too. You never told us that," he said to Fury. "We didn't know. He never consented for any tests," Fury said back. "Where's Spider-Man? He had to go to work, apparently. I didn't know Spider-Man had a day job," Clint remarked. "I can't believe I have to replace my sign again," Tony sighed. Steve shot him a look. "Priorities, Stark. I know. "You might want to wait up on that anyway," Fury suggested. He turned to Coulson. "Secure that cosmic brick and make sure it gets back to the Richards lab for analysis." "Yes, sir," he said with a nod before moving off again. "You're calling them cosmic bricks?" Tony asked, raising an eyebrow. "They came from the Sky Surfer you encountered," Fury explained, "and from what we're reading, they seem cosmic in origin." This is the first dialogue from the game that I actually remember, being from the game. I don't know, I have very vivid memories of that "secure that cosmic brick" line from the game. Again, probably because I just started replaying this for the first time, so. Natasha and Steve gave each other a look. "When his board broke, the pieces took on different properties and scattered all over the place. We're tracking a number of them as they're being discovered and moved to different locations. I've given Reed Richards the task of finding out what they can do, if anything. You and Banner would both do well to help him out." Tony put his faceplate back down and flew off towards Stark Tower. "The rest of you, come with me." That's the end of the chapter. What? That's it? Okay, I have some comments. Number one, I understand it totally makes sense that Fury would send Tony off to help them, but Tony just got shot out of the sky and then fought a giant Sandman. You want to maybe tell him to go get some rest? Jesus Christ. Anyway, so that chapter was fine for what it was. It wasn't the best thing in the world. There was definitely some writing stuff in here that bothered me. Again, wasn't super duper annoying. I have more problems with the content of this chapter than I do with the actual, prose and stuff. Because, between, the stuff that I already explained, I am still bewildered at Fury just being like, "Go help Reed Richards," and Tony being like, "Okay, bye." And then he's just like, "The rest of you come with me." And there's no further explanation of what's going on or anything. Jesus Christ. The other issue is the fact that he had Natasha and Clint and Steve come down there in the first place. I get it. He wanted to brief everyone on the current situation, but they should have all gone to a base or something. It's very weird to do this. Number one, out in the open where there's a bunch of civilians who can hear what's going on, so you might cause a panic. Or just let slip classified information. They should have gone back to the helicarrier and talked about this, Since number one, Bruce is going to have to go back to the helicarrier anyway. And then number two, Tony can fly. So it's not like it would have been too much of a hassle for him to get down there, Just don't do it out in the open in front of all of the civilians. Now, what I will say is that scene does come from the game. In the game, I think Fury does the briefing on the ramp leading up to Grand Central Station. I think that exists in real life. So they're literally in the middle of New York City and he's just like, "The cosmic bricks." And it's like, what? But in a video game where all the characters are Legos, you're like, "Oh yeah, whatever," But in a thing like this where there's no indication that anyone is a Lego of any sort and it seems like it's real people, don't do that. But anyway, let's move on to chapter 2. Now, I am going to warn you now. Chapter 2 is incredibly long. Jesus Christ. I don't know. There was a time where this chapter was 4,000 words even. It is shorter because I did edit it after the fact, and also the fact that there is an editing cut, so that changed things as well. So the first part of the original chapter is missing. I'll explain that to you when we get to it, but this chapter is still extremely long. So, buckle in. 4 hours later, and they had another situation on their hands. Natasha crouched down next to the desk as Maria clacked away at the keyboard, the computer screens in front of them covered with shifting figures and internet video of Captain America and Mr. Fantastic in Times Square fighting Dr. Octopus with Spider-Man's help. Jesus Christ, that was a long sentence. That was 3 lines. My God. Ock had been added to the list of people who wanted a piece of the cosmic brick, having gotten into the Baxter building and stealing it from Dr. Richards. This is a mess, Natasha muttered as she watched Ock pull a helicopter off the ground and swing it into the side of a building. It seemed she had been right about them having a long day ahead of them. Yeah. Jesus Christ. This is yet another incident from the game that Natasha and Clint are just not present for. At least we're getting to see parts of it, but we're watching it on a computer screen. I think we should think of Lego Story like a TV show, because I think that would actually be the best medium for it outside of a video game. This should not be the primary scene and action that we're seeing. This should be something we cut away from the action to see. You know what I mean? It's just bizarre that I did this. And like, it's to the point where later in the story, I had to make up shit for Natasha to do while all of the rest of the story was happening. Like, she literally goes on side missions and stuff. It's not just make someone else the main character. I don't get it. And like I said, I really don't think a novel is the best medium for this because there's so much going on that there is a lot of switching back and forth between characters. A television show would have been much more apt. Sir, Maria began without looking back at the director. It looks like the brick is being moved. Again? Clint said, leaning his chair back and peeking around the side. Where to? Fury asked. Not far, only a few blocks, Maria told him. That's strange. Do we have a visual? Natasha began sifting through the videos on another monitor, her eyes scanning for more recent timestamps. Here, she said, swiping all the other windows away with her hand. The brick floated down toward the ground like it was made of paper, and Spider-Man swung up to get it, but then, out of nowhere, Green Goblin swooped in and caught it in midair before disappearing into the city. Okay, at least that run-on sentence had a bunch of commas in it, so there was breaks, but Jesus Christ. It's the Goblin. Oscorp's only down the street. Make that another for the list. Tell Captain Richards not to pursue, Fury said to Maria. I want you two down there. Yes, sir, Natasha and Clint said at the same time. Get that brick, and watch out for his creepy crawlies. So this is a good place for an actual formal pause here because, Jesus Christ, everything happens so quickly. Like, we cut from one chapter. We don't even get to see, like, a resolution. And sure, that might not happen. It's going to take a while for them to get rid of all that sand. They don't, like, there's nothing about, like, we're going to figure this out. Just, you guys come with me, as if we're going to learn more, and then we don't. And the next thing you know, it's like, we got another one on the loose. And it's like, Jesus Christ, slow down. My God. I just had to relocate again, so if you hear anything in the background, my sister is watching her daily episode of Fixer Up in the other room. So anyway, what the fuck was I talking about? Whoops. Anyway, yeah, everything happens really quickly, and again, there was no preamble. And what I mean by preamble is that everything just kind of happens without prompt, almost. There's no kind of lead up to anything. I don't know where I got the word preamble from. It's the thing on the Declaration of the fucking Independence, like, or no, the Constitution, excuse me. But, geez. Anyway, so let's move on. So there are the 3 asterisks, which means there's a time skip or a scene perspective change in books. Are you sure you don't need us? Natasha glanced at Oscorp Tower over the top of the fence at the end of the alley, gleaming green in the afternoon sun. Yeah, she said. You know how Fury gets when it's busy like this. Spider-Man's probably already over there. Besides, he wants to talk to you, Clint added, pointing to Reed. Probably about where you got to on that brick. All right, Reed said tentatively. Orders are orders. Steve glanced back at them one more time as they left. That's all we get of Reed Richards? No actual introduction? Oh God, Reed Richards, come on. Okay, the only reason I make a big deal about this is not necessarily because Reed is like a famous Marvel character, though he fucking is. It's because Reed features in more of the game than both Natasha and Clint. And I said this, I think, before. Reed is in at least 4 separate levels as a playable character. Point being that out of 15 levels, 4 is kind of a lot. And he shows up in other parts of the story too. It's just really weird that this character, who plays a big part, and even outside of that, if you abandon the plot of the game, he still is central in figuring out what's going on with the brick as one of the main science people. And all he gets is a line, and then he walks off screen and goes to the helicarrier. Like, what? That's so nutty to me. Anyway, Clint shook his head. He worries too much, he said of Steve. He's supposed to, she reminded him as she broke off the padlock on the gate. He's Captain America. Come on. She put on a casual demeanor as they crossed the street. It didn't even look like anything suspicious was going on at the tower. Not a single cop, she muttered. How in the world was he able to keep such a low profile? Maybe it's a good thing we didn't bring Cap. The stars and stripes are a little, conspicuous, Clint said back. They went around the side, down some stairs that took them to a door. All right, pause. Is Natasha wearing, like, the usual spy cat suit? Because there's no way you can casually enter Oscorp in your spy gear. Oh, Jesus Christ, this story. See, this is kind of why I ended up editing it and getting so drawn up in making the story more realistic. It's not necessarily that I thought that the game benefited from that, but you kind of can't go half and half. You either have to go full, like, cartoon / video game with it and make it like, we're gonna break into Oscorp, woohoo! We just, like, in the game, they literally walk in through the front door, basically, which happened in the original version of this. But if you're going to have it be, again, slightly more realistic, you can't have them just, like, cross the street in the spy cat suit, super casual. Like, what? Like, they have to infiltrate the building and sneak in and do a spy thing, you know? Jeez. This is hard to read because of the later draft that actually does try to go to the lengths to make this more realistic. Wait, Natasha said, spying a green light flashing above the doorframe. She knew they weren't going to get in easy, but there was no telling what that would do. Stand back. She pressed buttons at the bottom of her bracelets, and an iridescent shield of interlocking circles slid up her arms and over her suit. She walked up to the door slowly. Nothing happened. That's pretty slick, Clint said. Is that new? Yeah. Hurry, so it doesn't go off. He ducked through the door before she let it go. As soon as it closed, though, she heard the locking mechanism go off very loudly. Oh, boy. Was he expecting us? Is that who I think it is? She looked back and saw Spider-Man peeking in from the hall. Do you guys always like showing up fashionably late? Oh, man. Spider-Man is another character who is criminally underused in this. He is hilarious. What's going on? She asked back. Meet me on the stairs, he said as he glanced down the hall. We'll talk there. And then he disappeared. When they stepped out, she could see a man in all black, likely security, prowling through the adjacent hall. She pushed it into the stairwell quickly. Spidey was crouched down on the windowsill one flight up. Osborn's trying to put the place on lockdown without raising the alarm, he said. He knows I'm here. Darn this flashy suit. But that means they're going to be looking for anything that's even a little out of place. I hope you guys can look like you belong here. Okay, so they must not be wearing the spy clothes, because it doesn't make any sense. At the same time, though, why would they go on a... I think this is the problem with this, is that there's no parameters for this mission. They just show up and go to Oscorp. There's no, like, okay, Fury, what do we do? Or even, like, an indication of what Fury told them to do. They literally just show up and walk into Oscorp, and it's just, we're just here now. I'm very confused. That won't be a problem, said Clint. He got quieter as footsteps passed by the door. You tell us if you find anything about the brick, he said, tossing an earpiece up to him. We got work to do. Ooh, I love spy stuff, Spider-Man said playfully as he called it. Do I get to be Eagle 1? Just worry about not getting caught, Natasha told him. Eagle 2 then, okay. He opened up the window and climbed out onto the honeycomb structure adorning the exterior. Clint shook his head. Gotta love that kid, he said. We gotta find out where he took that thing. I highly doubt it's in his office. She clipped her words when the door below them opened again. The man in black came in and removed his sunglasses. No loitering on the stairwell, he said brusquely. Get back to work. The two of them hurried up to the next floor. Looks like we're taking the scenic route, he trailed off as one of the employees passed by. Natasha smiled at her politely. She clutched her things closer to her chest. Are we wearing too much black? He asked once she was gone. She probably thinks we're security. Come on. Okay, that's not a normal... That is not a normal reaction to a security guard. Is anyone else a little worried? The lobby of Oscorp Tower was huge, with soaring walls made of glass that let the sunlight flood in. There were at least 5 more guards here, by the front doors, the reception desk, and the elevators. See, I don't think I've seen this much surveillance in an Osborn-owned place since ever, Clint said quietly. Eagle 2 to Eagle 1, do you copy? She heard Spider-Man ask in a faux gruff voice on her earpiece. Yes, this is her. That's not very spy-like of you, Agent Romanoff. Sorry. What do you expect? I'm at work, she told him. How did that happen? You had something you wanted to tell me? I'm going downstairs. I don't know what kind of magic your people can do, but come to the archives. The Osborns keep all their dirty secrets in the basement. All right, we'll see you there, she said brightly. How come you get to be Eagle 1, Clint said. They moved toward the glass column holding the elevator, squeezing through the doors past a flock of employees as they emptied out. The computerized image of a woman appeared on the screen next to the door. Identification? An Oscorp ID on her phone. What? Okay, so there's a bit of stuff missing here. So Natasha has like a little card case with a digital like ID thing in it that she opens up and shows to the elevator, because it just says, and an Oscorp ID with her photo on it appeared on the small screen inside. There's nothing about the little black case, like, but anyway, she pressed it to the scanner. Clint did the same. Thank you. Please choose your destination below. She reached up and pressed the button for basement 1. Sorry, the robotic laboratories are currently offline, it told them as the doors closed. Please report to level B3, cross-species containment. Cross-species, she repeated. They had closed that place down after what happened with Dylan, and that was after they'd closed him down after what happened with Connors. Just can't stay away, said Clint, glancing at her. What were they cooking up down there now? Ooh boy, you don't want to know. So I think it's worth noting that the Spider-Man stuff in this is inspired heavily by the Amazing Spider-Man franchise, because at the time that was the Spider-Man franchise that was ongoing. Well, sort of. This story was written like a year and a half after the last one had. Or no, I keep forgetting about Spider-Man 2. That one, oh god, yeah. So The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I'm pretty sure came out in was it 2013 or it was coming out? Something like that. So this was clearly written after that came out. But either way, all of the Spider-Man stuff in every version of Lego Story is inspired by The Amazing Spider-Man. So that's why there are references to Connors, as in Kurt Connors, and Dylan, as in Max Dillon, who are the Lizard and Electro, respectively. Whereas Flint Marko is referenced here because he's in the video game. So moving on. When the doors slid open again, it was to brightly lit yet empty halls. After the doors had closed once more, the only sound was the humming of the lights. Beyond the glass walls were dark rooms filled with holding tanks. They were all empty. He does know we're here, she said. We're gonna have to see Koenig about these badges, Clint said back. The Brick's gonna have to wait until we can get out of here. Something thumped at the door at the end of the hall. Natasha and Clint's heads both snapped up. It came again, slow and almost clumsy. It wasn't a knock. Not from a person, anyway. What the fuck? I never realized how ominous that line is. Come on, she said, moving toward a door leading to a lab. She grabbed the knob and found it locked. The scanner next to it was off. Unsurprising. Is this glass bulletproof? It is, actually, she told him. Unlockable doors and unbreakable glass. Osborn was railroading them. There was nothing left but to confront the monster at the end of the hall. They crept toward the door, both with their guns drawn. She pressed down on the knob gently and the door creaked open. It was dark on the other side, but she could see clearly. Nothing was there. But that didn't relieve her. They emerged in one of the labs, maybe the biggest of them. The sound of their footsteps ricocheted over the concrete walls and the glass of the cages that soared over their heads. There was no sign of the thumping noise or anything that could have made it, until the sound of a door slamming shut. Her head snapped in the direction. Something black slithered up into the shadows above it quickly. What was that? Clint whispered. There was a thud as something hit the ground behind them lightly. She whipped around and saw the black slime falling from the ceiling, and the puddle it formed slowly reshaping itself into a humanoid figure. The muck on its face split itself and formed into a toothy maw that pulled back into a grin. She fired her gun instinctively. The thing roared as it began to bubble and slosh back to the ground. The two of them scurried off behind a cage and took cover. Now when she listened, she could hear labored breathing in the shadows. She caught a light out of the corner of her eyes and looked to see Spider-Man peeking out of a trap door in the floor. There was a low, guttural growl from above them. He motioned for them to follow. Okay, so what's going on here is that Osborn trapped them on the lower level with Venom, which is kind of clever. However, this is not what happens in the game. The way that this goes in the game is a little bit different. I think that, and we'll see parts of this when we get to the old version of the chapter, which I might actually put in the next episode now, because it's just so long. But in that version, they come in through the front door and they have to like fight through Oscorp scientists who are actually like operatives and stuff. And they finally reach the Green Goblin, and then he sends them to the basement through a trap door. And then that's where they get trapped with Venom. So we kind of cut out all of the meat of that other stuff, which is fine with me because that's part of the reason why that chapter is so goddamn long. But anyway, they climbed down a ladder and out of the ceiling of the floor below them, dropping down into an office. The furniture was broken and the white walls were stained with black. Goo dripped from the vent on the wall. What is that thing? Natasha asked. Venom, Spider-Man told them. The rest of him is already on this floor, so we gotta move fast. Rest? He's a big guy. Let's go. He took them out into a large corridor dripping with black slime. It dripped from the ceiling onto the floor in big strands and pooled up in the corner. It even covered the lights, making it darker than it should have been. Spider-Man was forced to walk on the floor. She could hear that breathing here as well, slow and heavy. This thing sure knows how to make a mess, she said, shaking her head. It can only stretch so far, though, said Spidey. If we get to the archives quick enough, we'll be out of its reach, at least for a while. That's where he keeps all his goodies, she asked. He nodded. It's only a few more floors down, but it's going to be locked up tight. We'll get in, Clint said. Just show us the way. They came to a large room with cages, but only two, both lit by bright lights. Big greasy tentacles pulled down the large door between them. We weren't going in there anyway, Spidey muttered toward them. He took them through another hall lined with more backlit tanks, colored puddles of slime shifting around inside of them. They rippled unnaturally, some rising in the lumps with eye-like white spots. A pool of yellowish slime gained a mouth and left a trail of saliva on the glass with its tongue. What are all these things for? Clint asked, looking at them sideways. I have no clue, but I hate them, he said. Last time I was here it was just venom, and that was more than enough. What gets to them? Loud noises and fire or other hot stuff. Things I don't have. We got you, kid. So, I understand them asking Spider-Man, and this is a common thing throughout the story. They'll be like, what is our enemy, weak against, to a person who knows more about it. That's also in the scene. But couldn't I have just showed that by having something light on fire and Venom? Actually, there was a scene that showed that. Natasha shot Venom and he went, curdling away. Don't does that not explain both the loud noises and the heat thing at all? I guess you could get confirmation, but still, it just seems weird to act like that didn't happen and the characters just ignored it. Anyway, he took them right through the room holding the generators that powered the building and to the door on the other end. Finger-like tendrils began to creep down and cover it so they couldn't open it. Clint aimed his gun. No, let me, she said. She swept a hand over her right bracelet and the circle pattern appeared over her hands in bright red. She pressed her palms right into the goo. It went curdling away as Venom let out a nasty shriek. Natasha cringed. Loud noise might draw Osborn's attention. The stairwell they moved into was small and dimly lit. The stairs went down to one more floor before they terminated. Spider-Man went to the middle of the floor and tapped it with his foot 3 times. A square-shaped hologram appeared on the ground, covered in that honeycomb pattern. My, how do we get into this? She said as she crouched down. He was smart enough not to have his password in letters or numbers, at the least. Not an issue. She pulled out that little black case again, opened it, and turned on the code breaker. She faced the screen toward the hologram and let it scan the thing. It projected its own holograms, lighting up the hexagons they needed to press in yellow. She followed right behind it, and then another layer of them appeared. She did the same, and then another one popped up to replace it. You weren't kidding about that, Clint said. You should see the other one. After 7 more, Jesus Christ, the hologram finally welcomed Mr. Osborn before it disappeared. A trapdoor appeared and slid back, revealing the ladder. That was easier than I thought it would be. Clint and Spider-Man both looked at her as she went down. What? I like that because that's not foreshadowing, but it's a hint at the fact that this is just something that Natasha does all of the time. And Natasha does do quite a bit of code breaking in this story. There's at least one other major incident of it that I remember distinctly, but it's kind of like her thing, along with just having the right gadgets for the situation. The archives were a little less that, and a little more like storage. The walls were stocked with weapons that the company had discontinued or been forced to scrap before mass production. He led them past all of that to a circular-shaped room at the end. Behind glass cases there were power suits, gliders, and shelves of vials with who knows what in them. 2 cases were empty. One was open. You're kidding, Spider-Man said with a sigh. I was so sure he would put it here. Hill, are you detecting any movement on the brick? At first there was silence, and then Maria answered her. It's just gone into motion, heading to the east and picking up speed. What happened down there? He was stalling, Natasha realized. He was holding us off so he could move it. And that's the end of that draft. Like I said, I'm actually going to end this here because the other edit of this chapter, the previous edit, is still 2,000 words long. So this episode will be an hour and a half, and I don't want to do that. So for what it is, this version of the chapter is fine. I don't want to say it is better than the other version in a lot of ways. It streamlines the action of the chapter significantly, and I do like that. It also gives us something new to look at, which I don't mind at all. Like the part where it sends them right down to the basement. That's not something that happens in the original story, and I do like that. It's a creative way of sort of bridging the gap between them getting in there and the part where we start to see the contents of the game. However, it is a bit lengthy, like kind of a lot lengthy. And I think I could have made the events even more concise somehow. There's a lot of just like walking and traveling to places. And I know that's just the nature of the media because in writing, you can't just cut to different scenes. You have to show them going to a place. But there's a lot of like moving around and not a lot of finding things that are significant. So I definitely think I could have worked on that and made the chapter even shorter and just get to the point very quickly. But for what it is, it's really not that bad. I definitely like it better than what I remember of the previous chapter. Like I said, this kind of really is a good example of that halfway point between the cartoonish stuff from the video game and the more realistic like tone that I seem to be going for, but it doesn't really meld them in a way that works. It just makes it feel like a bunch of stuff here is not making sense. I also feel like I said, Reed Richards should have had a better introduction. Like him and Steve just kind of unceremoniously leaving. At least in this one, there is an excuse for it. But it's still a little bit weird that we just kind of cut out all these other people. But anyway, it is what it is. And it's not that bad. For what the story is, it does what it needs to do. And it is interesting. So there it is. So next episode, we will pick up with the rest of chapter 2. So I will see you for that. If you like this episode though, like it on the YouTubes, subscribe to the channel so you will be notified when the next episode uploads. You can also check out other videos I have, like the rest of the fanfic reread project or some outside of the fanfic reread project stuff that I have. And like I said, I'll see you next episode. Bye!